content creator core. Here we are doing a lot of things that I did not expect I would ever be doing. One of those being holding a content creator mic and wearing a poncho. Never thought I would join the poncho parade, but here we are. And here we are also recording my first astrology podcast. I just wanted to make this to sort of give an intro to myself and give an intro to my astrology practice. And I'm also developing an intro to astrology course. So I wanted to kind of talk about that here and like why it would be fun to learn together, why I, want to bring this into the world. So I guess first off, I'll start by talking about who I am and how I entered this astrology space. God, it's so weird to talk to yourself to a video. So like shout out to all these podcasters and YouTubers out there. Like this is definitely a learning curve. I guess a little bit about me to start off with. I do host a podcast with my bestie Caitlin, and we talk about grief. It's called Death Club. We talk about dying, aging, grief, the necessity of all these cycles of life, which, feels very relevant to astrology. Talking and hanging out with Caitlin is way different than talking to myself. So shout out to all you content creators. Yeah, so I host Death Club with my bestie Caitlin. We also host a monthly grief group by the same name. My name is Izzy Cross. I have been studying astrology since I was 12 years old, and I've had a number of amazing astrology teachers. Yeah, I found it when I was really young because not only am I a Scorpio, but I'm like a 6X Scorpio in 1993, 1994, very similar to right now, 2025 into 2026. The planets were all moving together and they kind of stayed in the same sign. So my Scorpio stellium is beefy. Like it is so heavy, like it is bottom heavy in Scorpio. I think that when I first heard about the sign, I was like, oh, finally someone understands how deep and how strong and how complicated my feelings are. And I was like, how could my very subjective experience of life be so clogged? And so I think I was pretty obsessed in a very Scorpionic way from that point on. And yeah, I grew up, my mom was pretty woo-woo. She was an early adopter of, all the East Village single mom things like yoga teacher training, spelt bread, tiger milk, protein bars, anything of that nature. I think you can kind of get the gist. It's very reminiscent of the poncho look that I'm sporting right now. A lot of the people around her were really into astrology, and when they heard that my sister and I were Scorpios, there was just always talk around it. The more I've learned, I'm like, okay, truly feel very seen, which I do think is at the core of astrology and why right now we're in a time that it's being more widespread and widely accepted, way more than when I was younger. And it's because it really helps people feel seen. And ultimately, I think that's all any of us really want, among other basic needs being met. But I think that feeling of being seen can feel super empowering and super validating. And in my practice, that's something that I really try to bring to the forefront. My basic chart info is that I am a Scorpio sun, Scorpio moon, Scorpio Jupiter, Mercury, Venus, Pluto, of course, Sagittarius Mars, conjunct my North Node. So if like the people that are very deep into astrology know what Mars conjunct the North Node is like, can be pretty intense. But that Sagittarius North Node, Sagittarius Mars, definitely adds a little bit more fire into my chart. Then I have Aquarius Saturn and a Leo rising. Maybe that's why we're here. I'm recording a podcast and putting myself out on YouTube because I really just want to express and connect on these deep esoteric topics, complex topics, rich topics. One of the main reasons why I wanted to start giving readings and pursuing this as a more regular practice is because with all of the new interest and acceptance with astrology, there obviously comes a need for people to monetize their practice. And I think that's bred this sort of pop astrology, which is very much embedded in fear mongering. And I would watch videos and I would say, okay, this is interesting. And they're kind of getting somewhere, but there's no need to use astrology in that way, because to me, it just starts to become very much the way that, like, you know, religions, like the monotheistic religions, started to be used by using fear to control people. And even though you might not think that like getting people to watch your videos and views and X, Y, and Z isn't controlling people, but like people going to watch your videos and following along because you scared them is very much a control tactic that I have been on the receiving end of. And as someone who struggles with a lot of obsessive compulsive thinking, I was like, there's got to be a better way, because that's truly not how I use this ancient tool. So I'd really love to share how to use astrology in a way that feels more like a roadmap than something that we should be afraid of. Astrology and the map of the sky at any given moment is a mirror of us. It's similar to how when you do a tarot spread, it's going to be very much a mirror of what you're feeling in that moment. Astrology is all potential energy. So you can see a chart, and with, there being 5 million ways to skin a cat, there's 5 million ways to read a chart and to extract the potential energy of what those symbols, this language of symbols, might mean. Somebody might be experiencing similar transits in their chart with similar placements to someone else, but the potential of their life and the point they are in their life and their unique subjective environment and ability to, regulate and make choices, it's going to be different person to person what potential comes out. The kind of astrology that I want to continue to teach here in my course that I'm building out is understanding the language of these symbols so that you can interpret your own chart or anybody's chart or any kind of transit in a way that has a holistic view of all the different sort of iterations of what that unique combination of the sky could mean. To quote an astrologer, an archetypal astrologer that I really love, Lawrence Hillman, he talks a lot about how you're in a moment of crisis or you're in a pivotal moment in your life. It can feel so empowering to look to the stars and see yourself validated and reflected. Sometimes it's easier to like go back into the past and say, right, that was what was happening in my life. And that feels so much more clear now. That I understand what those symbols mean and what that meant for me in my life. And that's a huge reason why I'm excited to launch an actual class so that we can talk about specific charts, because I think that looking at your own chart is the best way that it's going to stick, because you're going to feel so clogged, like I said. Astrology is one of the many languages and one of the many lenses that we can use to understand our subjective experience and know how to utilize our gifts, know when our own challenges are coming up, know what's in our toolbox, I always like to say. This is an ancient practice. It's one of many frameworks to contextualize the world through. It's my preferred lens. It's the lens that has helped me understand myself and others. There are many parallels between, it's very in vogue, traditional Chinese medicine. There's a lot of parallels to, Mayan astrology. And I think that knowing that all of these things kind of connect us can help us feel more united rather than separate. And that also relates to one of my favorite quotes by my teacher, A.T. Mann. Even physics tells us that we come from the stars. Our body's chemical composition reflects the cosmos and contains traces of every element, confirming this ancient wisdom. Astrology is unique in that it contains everything: psychology, physics, mathematics, biology, sociology, history, art, science, rhythm, color, health, and more. Astrology confirms that I need not be anyone but true to myself. For me, that is the greatest gift of understanding. It is a science in that we use its set of rules and symbols to understand how we relate to others, to ourselves, and to the cosmos. Learning this language helps us expand our understanding of life itself. One of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves is the understanding and acceptance of who we truly are. So what I love to think about when I think about astrology and learning about myself and others is that we're inherently part of the world around us and always affected by the power of the planets that surround our little Earth, or more simply put, as above, so below. Each of us contains a unique mixture of each element, each sign, representing the changing of the seasons and the many ebbs and flows of our life's journey. And like I said, like we can spend our whole lives learning about ourselves and about our astrology and other aspects of astrology and still surprise ourselves. We're not one thing. We're always capable of growth and change. And astrology does not intend to put any of us in a box. The wheel of your birth chart indicates the many phases of life, like I've been saying, and many moments in our lives where we can and will affect change. Who we are is constantly evolving, and the universe will always give us opportunities for growth. We can use astrology as a tool to help us harness those opportunities by understanding our relationship to ourselves and the world around us more deeply. But yeah, the more you study your chart and the chart of others, the more you see that astrology speaks only to the multitudes that we contain. So understanding how like each element of astrology works for you in your birth chart and other charts that you'll learn to read. And I think instead of thinking of it as a way to predict or a way to, prevent certain things from happening, and there's no amount of learning astrology that's going to prevent quote unquote bad things from happening to you. Yeah, I guess I just kind of feel like anybody that claims that they can predict the future, that's always giving snake oil salesman. Only you know what's best for you, and a good astrologer or a good interpretation is going to help you feel empowered and in touch with your own intuition and validated in your own experience. As opposed to claiming that you can know what the future brings, I think astrology is a really great way to understand where you might be really good at something, or you might be, no wonder your soul is drawn to X, Y, and Z. Like, to quote another woo-woo quote, what you seek is seeking you too. And astrology can show us, give us some more clues on how to get there. Walking through those doors that are wide open and closing the doors that need to be closed. The goal is to understand yourself in a way that you can live the most fulfilling life and to experience everything that the world is offering you. One thing that I really like to emphasize, because I think, again, going back to the pop astrology aspect of all of this, people get really turned off from astrology because they feel like they're getting forced into one box, into one column, into one like, oh, you're sun sign this, you must be that type of thing. Again, to emphasize, a sun sign or any planet or any house, it's potential. So to claim that someone is one thing, the more you learn about astrology, the more you see how nuanced it all is and how much that reflects how nuanced and complicated all living beings are. Embedded in the practice of astrology are these paradoxes and contradictions, this need to hold two truths or many truths at the same time. The planets are moving every second, every minute, every day. We're also changing. We're also moving and adapting and, creating, to use another very in vogue term, creating new neural pathways and teaching ourselves new habits. We're going to experience many similar transits throughout our lives, but because we are different each year, each day, each second, each minute, we will experience those transits differently because we've accumulated different experiences. Anyway, I could go on with so many different examples of how astrology mirrors our own inner world. It's funny that I'm choosing YouTube and Substack to put things out because I've been super, super hesitant to share my practice and share myself on social media. I'm really not interested in being on Instagram or TikTok for a number of reasons, and I'm sure a lot of people are feeling similarly. Yeah, also just kind of feeling the ick from surveilling myself. We're here to share knowledge and connect with each other, and hopefully my approach and my practice will come across in these longer form videos and episodes. So I consider myself to be just generally a Western astrologer. I use the tropical zodiac, and I personally use Placidus house system. I do think that there's a lot to be learned and gleaned from whole sign. And there are honestly many times that the transits that I am going through make a lot more sense with whole sign interpretation. So I kind of like to look at both, but a lot of the time Placidus and whole sign will tell similar stories. That's where like having a nuanced and like well-rounded understanding of the many puzzle pieces that make up a chart interpretation really come in handy, so that you can be nimble and kind of like be able to flow with what symbols are coming through and what is more clear to you. That's why I do think that finding an astrologer that you really resonate with, that you really like rock with how they're interpreting something, or you can learn and interpret things yourself because you know yourself best. And that's the best way to extract the potential energy of what's coming through based on your own life and context. Also want to emphasize again that there is nothing about astrology that is definitive and prescriptive. In fact, the study of the movement of the planets and how it reflects us on Earth, you know, like I said, as above, so below type shit, it explains our own mutable nature, our own changeable nature, and our own transitions through different chapters of life. I think that it's a beautiful metaphor. I think a really great way to think about astrology is understanding that it's kind of a puzzle that fits into itself many times over. The houses, the signs, and the planets all relate to one another. So when you understand what a planet means, what a sign means, and what a house means, you can sort of turn it around like a safe or like a lock and see how those interpretations change. For example, I know what Neptune means, and I know what Aries means, and I know what the ninth house means. So how do I integrate all of those things together and put them into one larger image? It's by putting those puzzle pieces together, or rather I should say like building blocks together, that create a really rich and nuanced interpretation of all that potential energy, to keep using that phrase. So I will be an eternal student of astrology. I don't think that you can ever learn everything about it. I think it's constantly teaching us new things. We're constantly learning new things about the sky and the cosmos and how these things are impacting us. I mean, it's empirical evidence. My goal is to have these episodes like really provide you with like a true gorilla grip on what these things mean, so that you can feel confident when transits come up, or if there's like some fear-mongering astrology video and you're not, so you don't panic when something like that comes up, you know, like you can be like, well, actually, I understand why they're saying that, but it could also mean this. Any challenge that comes up in our lives, whether that's reflected in astrology or not, is a learning experience. And there's no need to live in fear and vibrate on that wavelength. But I do think that knowledge can help us navigate, you know, very chaotic waters and hardships that naturally arise. Planets are not dictating our lives, they're reflecting our lives. So there's no reason to fear them. It's more important to allow them to teach us things about ourselves. I want to share a lot of different astrologers and books that have really helped me get again, a gorilla grip on all of these things, because there's no reason to reinvent the wheel here. I think there's so many amazing resources for anyone to find and learn this stuff on their own. I just really want to implore you, do not use AI for astrology. I cannot emphasize enough how terrible, terrible ChatGPT and other AI platforms have been for astrology. I input my birth chart 5 times and they spat out completely different charts every time. And if that doesn't tell you how fried and how much of a flop they are, I don't know what could. Not to mention the environmental impact. And also just like, we should be learning from each other and from actual people who have studied this as opposed to robots. But yeah, I want this to be a space of learning and collaboration. And you can subscribe to my Substack. I sometimes write articles, but I'm leaning more towards doing podcasts because I'm way more of a yapper than I am a writer. I have a Mercury retrograde also in my birth chart, so there's definitely just like a stronger desire to do things in a unique way, and writing has never really called to me. I'll just say that. I am going to put these episodes out for free, but I do have the option to subscribe so that you can ask me anything in the chat. So essentially having an astrologer in your pocket. I love talking about astrology. Clearly, I've been talking for 30 minutes to myself about this. I really love digging into individual charts and specific questions, because when there's something that we're really looking at, we can get to the bottom of it together. Some very essential principles that I'm going to cover in my course are going to be obviously a very brief history on astrology and its origins, signs, planets, houses, aspects, eclipses and nodes, which are a really important part of astrology. And one of my teachers bases his entire practice heavily on these nodes. And fun fact, in most of my readings, when I bring up the nodes, that's when things really click for people, when they start to understand their north and south node. Because, and that goes to my next topic that I'm going to talk about in my course, is modalities and sister signs. Astrology is so much about finding the balance between two extremes. So when you understand your signs and then understand what the opposite sign has to teach you, that's when you can really reach the next higher octave of astrology and self-knowledge, and to use a Jungian term, individuation. That's always going to be something that you can come back to. And the nodes in your chart are one of the best places to start in understanding that push and pull in your life between many truths that you hold in your chart. Of course, we'll also talk about angles, which are your ascendant, your rising sign, your descendant, and your midheaven and your Imimium coli, your IC. Those are really, really important parts of your chart and everyone else's charts to understand, because it's the outward expression and the inward expression, and the way that people can come into our lives to reflect us and the way that we project ourselves. And there's a lot of amazing ways to look at where you have shadow and where you might need to unearth certain aspects. And that's all embedded in the chart. As a mega, Scorpio on steroids, I think that's my hashtag, my strange addiction about all of this is I love having X-ray vision with a birth chart. If you want to kind of gain that X-ray vision, stay tuned for real. I definitely also want to go into the difference between tropical/Western astrology versus Vedic and sidereal astrology. That's a very interesting topic and very astronomical, where they kind of branch out from each other. You will walk away knowing how to read a circle chart, because that to me is the only way to read an astrology chart. The way that CoStar has their little grid and Cafe Astrology has their little charts, square charts and grids, is not going to show you what you need to know. Shout out to CoStar. I appreciate that everybody has their birth chart information now and they have it just in their pocket like a Pokédex. Not really knocking CoStar, but I do have notes. I do have my critiques. One of my favorite things about astrology is understanding the hero's journey through the zodiac and what we can learn about the human experience through how the zodiac transforms, because every time a sign moves into another sign, they're carrying with them the knowledge and the wisdom of the sign before it, and sometimes the flaws of the sign before it. And they're building on that, and they're bringing in new aspects, and it really speaks to our human experience as we age, as we go through different phases of life. I think it's a really fun way to learn and understand the signs, understanding how they all kind of build upon each other. So that goes back to this concept of building blocks in astrology. Speaking of the hero's journey, I want to shout out Ursula K. Le Guin. The way that we live through each day, week, year, and so on in a very cyclical nature. She says, "What goes too long unchanged destroys itself. The forest is forever because it dies and dies and so lives." And I think that astrology can teach us, the zodiac can teach us the need to transform and the need to let go of things and the need to allow for change and loss to teach us. That's what nature does. That's what the planets are constantly doing. They're constantly shifting, and when things don't change, they rot, and we're not here to rot. We're here to thrive. There's a critique of, self-knowledge and self-exploration being navel-gazing in a way, but I think we're not going to be able to understand others and understand the macrocosm until we understand the microcosm. And there's a lot of parallels between the way that we experience things and the way that the world experiences itself. I hope that makes sense. I'm kind of just spitting. So from one of my favorite books on astrology from one of my favorite resources on astrology. It's called Jungian Synchronicity in Astrology. It's part 2 of a series of books by Alice O. Howell. She was like a Jungian psychologist and astrologer. Astrology, mother of astronomy in ages past, gives us one great talisman as we venture into the unknown. It is the secret assurance that underneath the bewildering confusion of our lives, there abides a cosmic order, a majestic and transcendent beauty so great that it bespangles the heavens with one sweeping arc, fearing not, at the same time, to miniaturize itself in the infinitesimal universe of an atom or in the incoming gasp of one dying. The study of astrology should remind us that, though we share the process of creating, we ourselves and our wondrous worlds within worlds are created. We did not create ourselves. Even our bodies were created by our parents and theirs, and on and back to whom? Who created our psyches? The answer to that surely is a paradox. What I'm trying to say is that though we can study the cosmos with a telescope on the one hand and with an electron microscope on the other, we can find the same affirmations in the normal scope of life. Here too, we live in the octaves of wonder, which, like the caducus of Hermes, spiral up and down, in and out, and in the most sophisticated simplicity. We live in a vibrational unity of color, sound, and invisible worlds, hidden and enfolded, implicit, one within the other, all waiting for human consciousness and appreciation to reveal them. And if something is too awesome or overwhelming, nature provides the same lesson for us in a smaller scale in our daily environments. Rain comes down in drops, not in one big splat, and time comes minute by minute, and were it not for clocks, we would measure it by heartbeats. The heavens arc and sweep in dependable beauty and majesty, and I am given time to try and unscrew the lid of a jar of marmalade. So, yeah, I'm a little bit speechless, love. That says a lot about how I like to use this practice. I hope that interests you too, and if so, stick around, like, sub, and lock in. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for letting me blabber on about my favorite topic. So yeah, that's a lot to chew on. Hope to see you soon.